Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
It's good to be here.
We have an incredibly packed edition today. And I really don't say that lightly. We're not just going to be reading the news. We're trying to connect the dots between a family in Haryana, a server farm that's literally orbiting the planet, and the battlefields of Iran.
It really is a day of contrasts. You have these high-tech, almost sci-fi aspirations clashing with very old, very deep-seated cultural habits.
Exactly.
And then there are geopolitical upheavals that feel just immense in their intensity next to these quiet scientific corrections to myths we've held for centuries.
It's a perfect summary. So here's how we're going to map this all out for you. We've got a roadmap that's going to take us through a big regulatory shakeup in the crypto world and a pretty rocky week for ISRO. That's our FAQ section.
And from there, we're going deep into the crisis in Iran, a very serious situation.
It is. Then we'll look at Google's plan to put data centers in space.
Which still sounds like science fiction to me, but apparently it's happening.
Right. Then our spotlight section will focus on the persistent preference for suns in Haryana and a really fascinating water revolution happening in Chennai. And finally, the magazine section. We're talking native bees, Amitav Ghosh on reincarnation, the origins of our language, AI Weiwei's art, and this one I love, the myth of the Indian swan.
That's a very diverse stack of stories. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with our FAQ section. Article 1 is all about crypto compliance. The headline is, India's new compliance standards for crypto exchanges. And it just feels like it's getting harder and harder to stay anonymous in crypto. What did the Financial Intelligence Unit, the FIU-IND, actually change?
They tightened the screws significantly. This was on January 8th. The FIU updated the anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism guidelines. So if you're a crypto exchange in India, the whole know your customer or KYC process, it just got a lot more invasive.
Invasive is a strong word. What exactly are they asking for now? Because, we're all used to uploading a PAN card or an Aadhaar.
Yeah.
Is it more than that?
Oh, much more. Exchanges now have to capture something called liveness detection.
A liveness detection.
Yeah. It means when you sign up, you can't just upload a static photo anymore. You have to provide a selfie that proves you aren't a bot or, someone just holding a photograph up to a camera.
So you have to blink or turn your head or something.
Exactly. It's checking for biometrics to make sure the person creating the account is a living, breathing human being sitting right there in front of the screen.
Okay, so they want to make sure I'm real. That actually seems pretty standard for some banking apps now.
It is, but it goes further. They also need to log the exact GPS coordinates. We're talking latitude and longitude, and the IP address of the user during that onboarding process.
Wow. So they want to know exactly where you are standing, down to the meter, when you sign up. That feels like a significant shift in privacy. You can't just be online anymore. You have to be physically located somewhere specific.
Precisely. It kills the ability to use a VPN to mask your location during sign-up, which was a common workaround. And then, on top of all that, they've mandated a verification method called the penny drop.
The penny drop. That sounds like something out of a magic trick.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually a pretty clever banking verification technique. The exchange sends a tiny amount of money, a penny, maybe a rupee or two, to the user's bank account.
I see. And if the transaction goes through, they know the account is real and active.
Right. It verifies the account is active. But crucially, the bank then sends back the name of the account holder to the exchange. So the exchange can match the name on the bank account with the name on the crypto account. It just confirms you are who you say you are.
So why this digital dragnet? Why this level of granularity right now?
The context here is terror financing. The regulators are very explicit about this. There are major fears about groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, using crypto to move money around the globe.
I remember the Binance case. They got into huge trouble with the U.S. over this not long ago.
Exactly. Binance had to settle for failing to report suspicious transactions that involve terrorists. And India wants to avoid that scenario completely. But here's the catch, and this is where it gets a bit nuanced.
Okay.
The major Indian exchanges, like WazirX and CoinDCX, they say they're already doing most of this. The founder of WazirX mentioned they already use liveness detection and geotagging.
So if the big players are already compliant, where's the gap? Who are they really targeting with this?
The gap is the DEXs, the decentralized exchanges. These are the platforms that allow for anonymous trading, peer-to-peer without a central authority. They're much, much harder to regulate because there's no CEO to arrest or central server to shut down.
Right.
So while people use them for privacy, they're also a haven for money laundering. These new rules are trying to close that net, but enforcing this on a decentralized protocol. Well, that's the real challenge.
It's a classic game of cat and mouse. You build a taller wall, someone builds a taller ladder. Okay, moving on to Article 2. And this is a bit of a tough one for space fans. ISR, PSLV-C62, launch failure, and third stage anomalies.
Yes, this was a very rough week for ISR. On January 12, the PSLV C-62 mission lifted off. And this is normally India's workhorse rocket. It's known for being incredibly reliable. It was carrying the EOS N1 surveillance satellite and about 15 others.
Yeah, and everything looked fine at first, didn't it? I was watching the stream, and the first couple of stages seemed absolutely textbook.
They were. The launch and the early stages were completely nominal. But then, towards the very end of the third stage burn, the PS3, things went wrong. Mission Control reported a roll rate disturbance.
That sounds terrifying in rocket speak. What does that actually look like?
It means the rocket started spinning uncontrollably along its long axis. Imagine throwing a dart, but instead of flying straight, it starts spinning like a drill bit.
Oh.
Because of that spin, it just deviated from its path. The guidance system couldn't compensate, and the satellites couldn't be deployed into their orbits. The whole payload is now expected to fall back and burn up over the Indian Ocean.
This sounds oddly familiar. Didn't we just deal with the third stage issue pretty recently?
You're spotting the pattern, and that's the serious part. This connects directly to the PSLV C-61 mission from May of 2025. That mission also failed during the PS3 stage. In that case, it was a pressure drop in the motor casing.
2 failures in a row on the exact same stage. That seems like a massive red flag.
It is. The PS3 is a solid rocket motor. It's supposed to be simple and robust. 2 back-to-back failures suggest something systemic, maybe a manufacturing defect, something in the casing of the propellant. And this is where the transparency issue comes in. After the C-61 failure, ISRO formed a failure analysis committee, an FAC. They submitted a report to the Prime Minister's office in mid-2025. But that report, it's never been released to the public.
So we don't know exactly why the first one failed, and now the second one has failed in a very similar way. That does not instill confidence.
Exactly. And the stakes were so much higher this time. The PSLV C-62 was the first failure where the rocket was carrying paid customers, foreign and private satellites. Thailand's Theos 2A was on board.
Ouch. That has to hurt their commercial reputation. It's one thing to lose your own satellite, but losing a client's payload is. That's bad for business.
It really is. Now, Thailand's satellite was insured, but here's a detail that really stings. The private Indian payloads on board reportedly weren't insured. Launch insurance is incredibly expensive.
Right.
This just puts immense pressure on ISRO to figure out if there's a systemic manufacturing defect in that third stage. You can't run a commercial launch business if your workhorse rocket keeps having these repetitive failures.
Absolutely. Transparency is going to be key. If they want private players to trust them, they have to open up the books on what went wrong.
Okay, let's shift gears from space to the legal world for Article 3, India's evolving framework for institutional arbitration. This is all about how businesses settle disputes without having to clog up the courts.
I always think of it this way. If the court system is a massive traffic jam, arbitration is supposed to be the fast-moving toll road. But it feels like in India, that toll road is just permanently under construction.
That's a very, very apt analogy. The government has been trying to fix this since 2019. They proposed creating an Arbitration Council of India, the ACI. But 6 years later, it still hasn't fully materialized.
Why the delay? It seems like it should be a straightforward bureaucratic fix.
Well, the main criticism is that the proposed council is just too government-heavy. You have to remember, in India, the government is often the biggest litigant in these disputes. Think about big construction contracts, infrastructure projects.
Right.
So if the government is also appointing the regulators who grade the arbitrators, you have a pretty clear conflict of interest. It threatens the whole idea of independence.
That makes perfect sense. You don't want the opposing team to be the one hiring the referee. But there's a new draft bill from 2024, right? Does that fix the problem?
It tries to shift the approach. The 2024 draft bill changes how an arbitral institution is defined. It moves away from needing, a high court designation to just looking at the function of the institution. But the really big change is in trying to reduce court interference.
How so?
Currently, even if you're in arbitration, you can still run to the courts for what are called interim measures. Things like injunctions or stay orders kind of defeats the purpose of avoiding court in the first place.
Yeah.
The new bill puts a clock on that. If you file for court relief, The 90-day clock to actually start the arbitration process begins ticking immediately.
So it forces you to stop stalling and get back to the arbitration table.
Exactly. And I think I saw something about emergency arbitrators in the text as well.
Yes, Section 9A. This is a very modern feature. This would allow an emergency arbitrator to step in and give those interim orders before the main tribunal is even formed.
That is standard practice in places like Singapore and London. The goal at the end of the day is to make India a hub like Singapore or Hong Kong. But unless they solve that trust deficit, that fear that the government is controlling the referees, it's going to be a very hard sell to foreign companies. Foreign investors want neutrality above all else.
It always comes back to trust, doesn't it? Whether it's crypto exchanges, rockets, or legal contracts. Okay, that wraps up our FAQ. Now we are moving to our profiles section, and Article 4 it's a heavy one.
It is. The headline is The Revolutionary Road, Iran Between Sanctions and Siege.
We're looking at a country that the source describes as a tinderbox. It is January 2026, and Iran is just reeling. Can you set the scene for us? Why is everything coming to a head right now?
It's a perfect storm of crises. You have a currency collapse. The rial is down 60%.
Yeah.
Food inflation is at 72%. I mean, just imagine your grocery bill nearly doubling in a year while your salary stays the same. People are hungry and desperate.
And this is all happening in the aftermath of a war with Israel and the U.S. in June of 2025.
Yes, so the infrastructure is damaged, the economy is cratered, people are desperate, and then you get the spark.
What was it?
The spark came in late December 2025. Shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar went on strike. Now, you really have to understand the history here. The Bazaris, the merchant class, they were instrumental in the 1979 revolution. They financed it, they supported the Ayatollahs. When they turn on the regime, it is symbolically massive. It means the regime has lost its oldest allies.
So who are the key figures trying to manage, or I guess exploit, this chaos?
On the government side, you have President Masoud Pezeshkian. He's a heart surgeon who became a politician elected as a reformer. But reading the source, he just sounds completely helpless. He's quoted saying, "I can't make miracles happen." He openly admits the government is stuck.
That is startling honesty from a head of state. Usually they're all about projecting strength.
It's a sign of desperation. Then, looking from the outside, you have Reza Pahlavi. He's the exiled son of the Shah living in the U.S. He's pushing for a restoration of the monarchy. And he's being openly supported by Israel and some U.S. politicians.
And Donald Trump is back in the mix, too.
Yes. Former President Trump was tweeting during the protests. He posted "locked and loaded" and was encouraging the protesters to take over institutions. It was very, very aggressive rhetoric, just pouring gasoline on the fire.
So you have hyperinflation, strikes, a helpless president, and foreign powers cheering on a collapse. Did the protests work?
This is where it becomes a tragedy. On January 10th, 2026, the crackdown happened. The source says over 3,000 people were killed. Lethal force was used without hesitation.
3,000. That is a massacre.
It is. And we have to talk about the geopolitical layer here. The source is very specific about Israel's involvement. It mentions Mossad actively encouraging protests via social media, telling people the time has come.
So it wasn't just organic unrest. It was being pushed from the outside.
It was organic economic pain, but it was being weaponized by external enemies. With Iran's regional allies, Syria and Hezbollah, weakened by the conflicts from the previous year, Iran was vulnerable. The regime held on this time because the security apparatus didn't fracture. The Revolutionary Guard stayed loyal.
But what's the long-term outlook?
The analysis in the piece is that the revolutionary road is torn. The social contract between the people and the state is completely broken. You can't kill 3,000 of your own citizens and expect things to just go back to normal.
It sounds like a situation that is just waiting for the next spark. The fear is keeping the lid on for now, but the pressure is still building. From the heat of geopolitical conflict, let's go to the cold vacuum of space. Section 3. Science, Article 5. Project Suncatcher, powering AI with orbiting data centers.
This is one of those stories it really makes you double-check the date to make sure it isn't April Fool's Day. Google wants to put servers in orbit.
It sounds wild. I mean, we all know AI eats up electricity, but putting data centers in space? Why go to that extreme? Is the power grid on Earth really that constrained?
It is becoming that constrained, yes. AI needs massive amounts of energy. Training a single large model can consume as much electricity as a small town. On Earth, that puts a huge strain on the grid, and it creates carbon emissions. In space, you have 247 access to solar power. No night, no clouds, just constant high-intensity energy.
Okay, so unlimited power is a good reason, But space is an incredibly harsh environment. I'm just thinking about how my own laptop overheats if I leave it in the sun. How do you keep a supercomputer cool in a vacuum?
That is the core engineering challenge. On Earth, you use fans to blow air over the chips, or you use water cooling to move the heat away.
Yeah.
In a vacuum, there's no air to blow. Convection doesn't work. You have to rely on radiation, literally radiating the heat away as infrared light. It's a completely different thermal management game. You need these massive radiators.
And is this like Starlink? Just a big constellation of satellites for internet?
No, and that's a really key distinction. Starlink is all about coverage blanketing the Earth so anyone can get a signal. Project Suncatcher is about dense clusters. These satellites would be just kilometers apart from each other, talking to each other with petabit per second links.
Petabits? That's an insane amount of data.
A huge amount of bandwidth. The idea is that the heavy lifting, all the AI processing, happens up there, within the cluster. The user on Earth just sends a query like, write me a poem, and gets an answer back. You don't need a fat pipe to the ground. You need those fat pipes between the satellites to process the logic.
So is this actually feasible, or is it just, a cool PowerPoint presentation to impress shareholders?
Google is doing real testing.
Yeah.
They've tested their Trillium TPUs, their AI chips for radiation. They survived 15 CradSci, which is promising. It means the chips won't just fry immediately from cosmic rays. But the economics are the real hurdle.
I can imagine it must be astronomically expensive to launch a server farm.
Extremely. Google's own estimates say that launch costs need to drop to about $200 per kilogram by the mid-2030s for this to make any business sense. Right now, we are nowhere near that, even with SpaceX. And then there's the maintenance issue. As the expert in the piece points out, you can't send a repair guy to orbit.
Right. If a server crashes in space, it stays crashed. If a hard drive fails, you can't just swap it out.
Exactly. Microsoft tried putting servers underwater a few years ago, Project Natick. They eventually gave up on it. Space is even harder and more inaccessible than the ocean floor. But if they pull it off, it completely changes the energy equation for AI, basically offloads the carbon footprint of artificial intelligence to orbit.
It's a fascinating gamble, offshoring our pollution to space. Let's come back down to Earth for our spotlight section. We're going to Haryana for Article 6, the 10th child, son for the Singwai family.
This is a story that really, it pulls at you, but it also reveals some very hard data about Indian society. We meet the Singwai family in Danipojraj village. They have 9 daughters. And finally, on January 4th, they had a son, Dilkush.
And the reaction to this birth was different.
Starkly different. The source describes how trophies of the daughters line the wall. They're achievers in kabaddi and dance. They're talented, celebrated kids. But the big celebration, the DJ, the balloons, the welcome sign, all of that was reserved for the boy.
Why? I mean, is it about land, inheritance? That's usually the reason we hear.
And that's the most tragic part. They have no land. The father, Sanjay, works in a plywood factory. It isn't economic, it's purely social pressure. The mother, Sunita, faced years and years of taunts for being brotherless.
That phrase, brotherless, it's so loaded it puts the stigma on the sisters, too.
It does. Even the daughters themselves wanted a brother. One of them said she wanted to avoid being bullied in the schoolyard. She said, "Baake saath masti alag hai." Fun with a brother is different, but she also hinted at needing a protector. They felt the social deficit of not having a male figurehead in the family.
But we always hear about how the sex ratio is improving in Haryana. The government campaigns like Beti Bachao seem to be everywhere. Is that not working?
It's a paradox. The data says the sex ratio at birth is up. It was 923 females per 1,000 males in 2025. That sounds like progress. But activists like Sunil Jaglan point out this statistical phenomenon called the stopping rule.
The stopping rule? What is that?
It's exactly what we see with the Singwai family. Parents keep having children until they get a boy, and then they stop. So statistically, you end up with more girls being born in the process because families are trying over and over again. This improves the ratio mathematically, but the motivation is still a desperate desire for a son. They aren't having daughters because they want them. They're having them while waiting for a son.
So the numbers look better, but the underlying mindset hasn't really changed. That's a crucial distinction.
Exactly. And the health toll is just immense. Sunita endured 11 pregnancies. She loves her kids, but she admits, "My face is no longer the same. I look tired." It's a physical cost paid by women to satisfy this social preference.
That's just heartbreaking. I look tired. A whole life story in 3 words. Let's move to Chennai for Article 7, Chennai's water shift.
This is about a different kind of water pressure. Chennai is trying to end the era of the water sump.
Anyone who's lived in Chennai knows that drill. You wait for the water to come, you fill the sump, you turn on the motor to pump it up to the overhead tank. It's a scarcity mindset that defines your day.
It really does. And the government wants to move to a 247 continuous pipe supply. The pilot for this is happening in Zone 13 Adyar. The ultimate goal is drink from tap, inspired by a similar project in Puri, Odisha.
That sounds great in theory, but I have to imagine residents are pretty skeptical. Chennai has had serious water crises forever.
They are very skeptical. The trust is low. People rely on bottled water, consuming 2 to 3 core liters of it daily across the city. They just don't believe the tap water will be safe. But there's a technical reason to switch to a continuous supply that I found absolutely fascinating.
What's so?
It's called the vacuum effect. When you have intermittent supply water, comes on for 2 hours, they goes off, the pipes empty out. When they empty, the pressure drops. And if there are any cracks in those pipes, and there always are, the empty pipe can physically suck in the surrounding sewage or contaminated groundwater.
Oh, that's disgusting. So the very act of turning the water off makes the pipes dirty.
It's a huge source of contamination. If you keep the pipes full and pressurized 24/7, the water pushes out of any leaks, which prevents contaminants from getting in. So continuous supply is actually cleaner by design.
But there's a catch for the consumer, isn't there? Meters.
Yes. The new system comes with meters, and residents are terrified of overbilling. But the authorities need the meters to find leaks and cut down on what they call non-revenue water. It's a transition from a flat-fee scarcity model to a pay-per-use utility model.
And they're building the infrastructure to support it? Desalination plants like the one at Pur? It seems like Chennai is trying to engineer its way out of the monsoon cycle.
They have to. Urbanization has drained the aquifers. They're also building a ring main system, a circular pipeline. So if one water source fails, they can route water from another. It's all about building resilience.
Resilience seems to be the theme today. Let's move to our magazine section. Article 8, Saving Native Bees.
This is a great story about the unsung heroes of agriculture. Did you know that the shape of your apple actually depends on a bee?
I did not know that. I thought an apple was just an apple.
Apparently not. Research shows that the quality of pollination affects the fruit's size, shape, and even flavor. If a flower isn't pollinated thoroughly, the fruit can grow lopsided. And in India, we have a native hero, the Apis cerana, or the Asian honeybee.
But we also imported European bees, right? The ones they use in the West.
We did. Back in the 60s, the Apis mellifera. It produces more honey, so everyone wanted it. But it turns out the European bee is high maintenance and very disease-prone in India. It doesn't handle our climate well. The native bee is the real star. A farmer in Himachal, Devinder Thakur, says his apple yields literally double when they use native bees.
Double! That is a huge difference. Why are they so much better?
They have a trait called floral constancy. They tend to stick to one type of flower at a time, so if they start on apple blossoms, they stay on apple blossoms. This makes them much more efficient pollinators for that specific crop. The European bees are a bit more promiscuous, jumping between different plants.
So if our native bees are so good, why are they in trouble?
Well, this is a case of systemic irony. The government approved nearly 38,000 crore rupees for fertilizer subsidies. Fertilizers and pesticides kill bees. Meanwhile, the budget for beekeeping initiatives, just 500 crore.
That is a massive mismatch. We are subsidizing the poison and barely funding the cure.
It gets worse. The Department of Biotechnology is funding research into genetically modified insects. Experts are terrified these could go rogue, like the cane toads did in Australia, and just wipe out the native populations through competition or disease.
So we're funding things that kill the bees and barely funding the bees themselves. But there is a citizen movement to help.
Yes. Bee hotels are becoming a thing in cities. People are setting up these little solitary bee habitats on their balconies, using things like bamboo shoots or drilled wood. It's a really great grassroots attempt to save the local buzzers.
I love that. Bee hotels. Next up, Article 9. A literary giant returns. Amitav Ghosh on Ghostai and the Science of Reincarnation.
Amitav Ghosh is back with a new novel, Ghostai. And as always, he's blending incredible storytelling with these deep philosophical questions.
And this time, it's reincarnation. That seems like a bit of a departure for him, or maybe a return to his roots.
A bit of both. But he doesn't approach it just as a matter of religious faith. He looks at it as a challenge to what he calls the modern materialist worldview. He actually cites evidence of children recalling past lives with incredible accuracy, names, locations, causes of death that they couldn't possibly know.
He's basically saying there's more to consciousness than what we can measure in a lab.
Exactly. He's challenging the idea that death is a hard stop. He's also diving into the culture of food. In the book, and Bengal in general, fish isn't just nutrition. He calls it a dense web of symbolism.
And he's also very political when it comes to the climate crisis, right? He's written nonfiction on it, like The Great Derangement.
He pulls no punches here either. He argues that the Anglo-American empire is built on fossil fuels, and he says this creates an emotional attachment. They can't let go of oil because it's so deeply part of their identity. He calls Trump's withdrawal from climate action disastrous. He links the political unwillingness to act to a kind of colonial hangover.
And he's doing something very unique for the future as well.
The Future Library Project. It's this amazing art project in Norway. He's writing a book that will be placed in a time pod in a forest, and it won't be open for 100 years until 2114.
Writing for an audience you will never ever meet. That is a heavy concept.
He admits he's at a dead end trying to write it. I mean, how do you write something relevant for a century from now?
Yeah.
Will they even read English? Will they have fish? It's a fascinating creative struggle.
Speaking of centuries, let's go back millennia. Article 10, The Origins of Language.
This is based on Laura Spinney's book, Proto, and it tries to answer a huge question. Where did English, Sanskrit, and Greek actually come from? We know they're related, they're all Indo-European languages, but where was that mother tongue actually spoken?
I always hear so many debates about this. Did it start in India? In Europe?
Well, the verdict from the latest science using paleogenetics, which is ancient DNA and archaeology, is the Steppe hypothesis. The language family was born about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago in what is now the war zone between Ukraine and Russia.
The Eurasian steppe. So that means Sanskrit didn't originate in India?
According to this evidence, no. It arrived around 1600 BCE, coming from the northwest, carried by migrants. And the most compelling evidence is linguistic. The Sanskrit word for chariot is ratha.
Right, like the Rath Yatra festival.
Exactly. That word comes to the Proto-Indo-European word for wheel, which was rote. And archaeology shows us that the Suncatcher culture in the Russian steppe invented the spoked wheel chariot around 2000 BCE. So the technology and the word for it traveled together. You don't have a word for chariot before you invent the chariot.
And since the invention happened on the steppe, the word must have come from there too. That connects the dots beautifully. But what about the Harappan people? They were in India long before that.
And that remains a huge mystery. We still can't read the Harappan script because we don't have a Rosetta Stone, bilingual text to help us translate. Until we find something like that, their language is silent to us.
A silent language and a loud artist. Article 11, Weiwei in India.
The man who famously smashed Han Dynasty urns is finally exhibiting in India. His first solo show is at Nitra Morte in Delhi.
He is famous for being a provocateur. What's he showing?
He's exploring these cultural fault lines. One of the most striking pieces involves Neolithic axis stone tools that are thousands of years old. And he has painted them with the Coca-Cola logo.
That's a very harsh commentary.
It is. It's a warning about the corporate flattening of history, taking something ancient and sacred and just branding it with a symbol of mass consumption. He also has his Lego art recreating masterpieces by Monet and Vermeer using Lego bricks. He calls it the art of the pixel age.
It degrades the original image into blocks, just like digital compression does. What's his message to India specifically?
He sees India and China as civilizational cousins, both ancient, both unique cultural presences. But he also speaks about resistance. He calls art a spiritual staff in an era of AI and surveillance. And he has this quote, "No matter how close it seems to an inferno of suffering, the inner world can remain in bloom."
That is beautiful. The inner world can remain in bloom. Even in a surveillance state, you have your mind. Now, for our final story, Article 12, we are going to debunk a myth, the myth of the swan.
This is a classic case of something being lost in translation. We all know that image of the goddess Saraswati riding a swan.
The Hansa.
Right, the beautiful, white, elegant swan with the long neck. It's iconic. Well, it turns out the Hansa isn't a swan at all. It's the bar-headed goose, Hansa indicus.
A goose. That feels a bit less elegant. Swans are graceful, geese are kind of noisy.
But it's biologically and geographically accurate. Swans don't migrate over the Himalayas. They're lowland birds. The bar-headed goose does. It flies at 25,000 feet over the highest peaks on Earth Everest, K2. It's an incredible athlete of the bird world. It literally has the lung capacity to fly where jumbo jets fly.
So how did it become a swan in our minds?
Colonialism. When British translators in the 18th and 19th centuries saw the word Hansa, they translated it as swan, because that's the bird they knew from European mythology, Zeus and Liada. They just projected their own symbols onto Indian culture. They erased the Indian geography from the story.
They Europeanized the bird.
They did. If you look at 12th century temple carvings, the bird has a blunt beak and webbed feet. It's clearly a goose. But modern posters all show the long-necked European swan. The expert in the piece calls it a colonization of imagination.
So reclaiming the goose is reclaiming the truth of the landscape. It's a bird that actually belongs to this part of the world.
Precisely. It's about ecological accuracy. And giving credit to a goose that can fly over Mount Everest.
From the geese flying over the Himalayas to servers orbiting above them, and the very human stories of families in Haryana and Iran. What a journey today.
It is striking how much of today was about origins and identity. Whether it's the origin of our language on the steppe, the true identity of a bird in our myths, or the identity of a child in a family. We are constantly trying to define who we are and where we fit in the bigger picture.
And that is what we try to do here every day. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.